Well, welcome to the Good Talk Podcast, where we remind you of the joy of life, the love of God, and the possibilities that lie ahead. Pete and Jordyn here with episode 79.
When trust is broken.
Boom.
Boom, dropped mic.
This, I think, might be one of the most practical podcasts we've ever done.
Really?
I really
feel like
believe
a
that.
lot of the ones that we do are practical.
No, I really believe there'll be some tools that we're going to talk about in this conversation that will greatly benefit you at work, at home, in your friendships.
Cool.
Like big time.
All right. I like it. I like it a lot.
We're going to get to that. But first, if you're watching on YouTube, in the background, you see a little bit of Christmas.
I could not help myself. First of all, it's not finished, not even close. We got our, I ordered garland and
She loves this garland.
I
y'all.
love the garland. It's so thick and like luscious. It's beautiful. But anyways, we never like splurge on decor because it's seasonal. So you don't like have it up long. You can't enjoy it long. But I feel like that was worth the splurge. Anyways, I got it in the mail and I was like, oh, I'm just going to hang it up just to see how it hangs and like how the shape is. It's still up and it's going to stay up until I get my other decor out. And it's only half the garland. Right now I'm waiting for another piece. So it looks really janky, but it's about to be full blown up in here. Next week, right? We're decorating.
We are, yep. And I will admit that the garland has lights on it. So it last couple nights watching TV just to have a little Christmas glow has been nice.
Honestly,
very warm feeling.
That's the best. That's my favorite part is nighttime decor because it's just like so cozy. And when it's gone in January, it just feels like I live in a cold, like sterile hospital.
So again, I think the question is, how soon is too soon? What's today? November 10th at the time of this recording.
Yeah.
November 10th. We have 2 people on our street that have their lights up already.
Yep. And I've seen like, you go to the mall or you go to shopping. I went today to this like little shopping center area and they have a huge tree up. Our Kroger has a huge tree up. So I feel like I need to do it.
Yeah.
But we've decided this week was too soon, but we're doing it next week. Like the week before Thanksgiving. Because I like for Thanksgiving to feel Christmassy in the house.
Yeah.
Even though I understand it's still like
Thanksgiving.
too early, but it's still Thanksgiving. But I feel like you kind of need that like coziness on Thanksgiving.
My guess is people listening to this podcast right now, there are a lot of divided opinions about this.
Strong opinions. I saw this study, I'm not even joking, that they said that people who decorate early for Christmas, scientifically, based on their studies, are happier people.
Really?
Yeah. I believe it. But think about it. Like, you're just kind of like, woohoo, I'm excited. Or maybe it's the opposite and we're all really sad and we just need our Christmas decorations to make us happy.
I don't know. Sad we need to put up some lights.
I don't know. But think back to like COVID times. Everyone decorated early for everything because we were all stuck in our house. So I don't know. I think there's a happy medium. Huh?
We had nothing better to do.
Right. So I don't think next week's too early. There's people out there that think very strongly otherwise. And some people just hate Christmas decorations. I had a girl on my Instagram that was like, I hate all Christmas decorations. I was like, well,
did you respond back and
don't
just
come
say,
to my house?
Gosh, you're a lot of fun at parties.
But
That's my favorite response. That like sometimes I'm more than happy to respond to criticism online and stuff like that. But sometimes the things they say are just so outlandish that it's like not worth your time. So my go-to response, and I'm not saying this is wise or smart, but when somebody just is just so critical and nasty and ugly,
something you don't know,
I always just respond with, I bet you're a blast at parties.
So horrible.
I bet you are a blast.
Because they read that.
It just makes me laugh, and then I can move on.
Yeah, well, and then probably just makes them more mad.
I know, but
fine.
Sometimes you just have to like add some laughter to the insanity that our world has become.
It's so true. Anyways, if you're decorating, props to you. If you're waiting, well, you must not be very happy.
I will say this real quick and we'll move on. The one benefit of waiting, I've noticed for me, like if we decorated this week, I wouldn't have really been in the mood. And we'll do it next week and I'll be a little bit in the mood. But if you did wait until like in December, I think you would be in more of a Christmassy mode, like, wow.
Or it can already be Christmassy and you can just relax in December and sit on your couch and watch Hallmark movies.
Well, as you said, we're decorating next week.
Yeah, so
Solved.
End of discussion.
End of discussion. Yes.
Oh man. Okay, so when trust is broken.
Yes,
I'm ready.
yes. I'm so excited about this. So, to be honest, this is some of this content is content that I have shared with organizations because I think it's really important on an organizational level to get this inside of your team, whether you have a team of staff of 5 or whether you have a staff of 500. This is a major important cultural piece, right, to any company. But I'm not going to go that in depth in these few minutes that we have. But that's where some of these points and these ideas, these concepts come from. And I just think that when we think about relationships, we all think about different characteristics that make a healthy relationship. And there's several of them, right? We could list things like grace, flexibility, respect, anger control. Like all those things play into a healthy relationship. But I think by far the most important characteristic that then allows you to solve some of the other issues and things that might be going on inside of any relationship is trust, right? I mean, trust is at the center of every healthy relationship. If there is no trust, there is no health.
Yep, I agree.
Doesn't matter what else is going on, right? And at the same time, and again, that would be true of work relationships. It's true of your relationship with your boss, your spouse, boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever. But I think that we also have to admit that as humans, because none of us are perfect, we are going to create gaps. And gaps are going to be created by other people around us.
And by gap, you mean like a space to question?
Yes, a space to question trust is what I mean by a gap. And I'll get a little further into that in just a second. But because we're human, we're going to create these gaps. So I'll give you an example of a gap. Let's say that I tell you I'm going to be home at 5 o'clock and you don't hear from me. It's 5 o'clock. I'm still not home. 5:15, I'm not home. 5:45, I've come strolling in the door. Hey, Jor, how's your day? In that moment, a gap has been created. I said I was going to do something, show up at 5 o'clock, and I don't roll in until 5:45. It doesn't matter what my excuse is. Maybe I was having a great time working. Maybe a conversation went a lot longer than I thought. Maybe there was a bad traffic jam. Either way, a gap's been created in that. Or let's say that I'm going to do a coaching session with somebody. It's scheduled for 2 o'clock. I get online at 2, and they just don't show. Now they've created a gap with me. They said they were going to do something, and then they didn't. Gaps will happen, right? We create them with the people around us, and the people around us are going to create them with us. It's inevitable. The big question is, what do you do with the gap? When a gap's created, what do you do with it? So they're going to be created in all of our relationships. How do we handle them? So I'm going to give you just 4 things that I think are important to think about when you have created a gap with someone or someone created a gap with you.
Okay.
First one is this. You have to be aware of your bias. We all have a bias. You ever heard of Patrick Lencioni? I can never say his name right.
Yeah.
I love that dude. His energy on stage is great. But he talks about fundamental attribution error. And he says fundamental attribution error essentially says this. It's a tendency to attribute the negative or frustrating behavior of another team member to their intention or their personality. So when someone exhibits some characteristic that's negative or frustrating to you, you always assign that to their, intentions or their personality. That's who they are. However, when we create a gap, when you create a gap in yourself, you don't attribute it to fundamental attribution error. You attribute it most generally to your circumstances.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So if I'm late and I told you I was going to be home at 5 and I roll at 5:45, it's because, I was doing such a good job with the client. We couldn't stop, right? It's because of my goodness that I'm 45 minutes late.
Yeah.
There was a car wreck, right? I was out of my control. I couldn't handle it, right? It's my circumstances around me. I paint it as positive.
Right.
If you tell me you're going to be at home at 5 and you don't roll until 5:45, I'm going to make all kinds of assumptions. She's lazy. She wasn't paying attention to time. She doesn't respect me. So you see the difference?
Yeah, that's a good point. That's so true.
There's a bias. Yes, we all do this. There's a bias there, and you have to be aware of that. I blame my stuff on environment. I'm going to blame everybody else's stuff on their character. So when that gap's created, the goal here with this first point is to be aware of your bias. Don't jump to a conclusion.
It's really good.
All right. The second thing is this: you have to engage instead of withdraw. And I believe if you're interested in repairing trust with someone who has created gaps with you, this is by far the most important step. We all have inside of us a trust meter, if you will, right? So every time you interact with another person, your trust meter is either going up or it's going down. This all happens completely subconsciously, but it's there, right?
Yep.
And you base this off all kinds of different factors, right? Their truth-telling record, their commitment keeping pattern, their confidentiality, their consistency in character, all of that stuff plays into your trust meter. And again, it happens subconsciously. So when you're in a conversation with a friend and that friend is gossiping about another one of your friends, without you even realizing it, in that moment, your trust meter is going down a little bit, right? Because in the back of your mind, you're thinking, even though you might be very interested in the gossip, right?
But you're like, I'm not going to share my stuff with her.
Yeah, in the back of your mind, you're thinking, well, what is she telling that friend about me? Your trust meter is going down a little bit. Or you catch a friend or a coworker in a lie, and you know it was a lie. Maybe it wasn't a big enough lie for you to confront them about it, but in that moment, your trust meter is going down. Now, when your trust meter is going down, the natural tendency is always going to be to withdraw. You're going to withdraw. And generally, the further we withdraw, what happens? The more suspicious we become.
It's true.
Right? So you don't address it. Trust meters headed south could be based on a whole bunch of different things that happened or you perceive that happened. But when that trust meter starts to go down, the natural tendency for the vast majority of us is that we begin to withdraw.
Well, it's because if you already don't trust them, you don't even trust their response to your engagement.
Yeah.
So like, say I want to talk about it. If you don't trust them, it's like, I don't want to talk to you about it.
Yeah.
Like, I don't trust that you're going to give me an authentic answer.
And when you withdraw, and I think it's a protection thing for most of us. Because again, without trust, you don't have a healthy relationship. So it feels unhealthy. It feels unsafe. So you withdraw to some degree to protect yourself. When you do that, though, there's no doubt about it. It is going to stunt, redefine, or even completely eliminate that relationship.
Yeah.
So what do? I think the wise person, when confronted with a relationship where the trust meter is headed south, if the relationship's important to you, right, you're going to engage instead of withdraw.
Yeah.
That's not the time to withdraw. That just makes it worse. You've got to engage in that, and you got to lean into that. And I have found that using this language around a gap being created is helpful. And so these corresponding points that are coming up, I think, will help explain that a little bit. But engage instead of withdraw.
Okay.
All right. Third thing you got to do: assume there's information you don't have.
That's a good one.
Yes.
And hard. Because I feel like I know everything in that
know,
moment.
I know. We all do. But if there's some gaps that have been created between you and another person, you should assume that there's probably some information you don't have. In fact, I think a great place to start when you do choose to engage them is right there.
Yeah, first.
Instead of jumping right into your thoughts on why they did what they did or why they didn't show up or why all the accusations that kind of come along when a gap's created, when you engage instead of withdraw, a great starting place is, hey, I'm going to assume there are probably some things I don't know.
Yeah.
Could you help me understand this better?
Yeah. That keeps you from acting a fool and looking stupid.
Yeah.
Because if I jumped all over you when you walked in the door with, I can't believe, and meanwhile you stopped on the side of the road to help Granny with her tire, I'd feel like a jerk.
Yes, you would.
know? Or any of those circumstances you
And
gave.
I would have already become defensive because you attacked me.
Yeah.
And it's gonna spin real quick.
Yeah.
Right? And so start with this idea that there's probably some information you don't have. I'll give a very generic version of a story that involves you and I,
Okay.
even in this past month,
Okay.
where I was trying to get a hold of somebody and I'd sent them some emails,
Yeah.
right? And there was no response. And this was somewhat surprising to us because there's been a pattern of decent communication, right? And so, you and I kind of went back and forth with maybe they're not getting them. Well, So I'd send another one. Hey, maybe you didn't receive this. Just wanted to make sure, nothing. And then you and I started spinning off worst case scenarios.
Yeah, we're like, this person's mad at us for some reason. This person has
Yeah,
it out for it.
they've
Like,
given up on us. They've canceled us. They've has something happened we're not aware of. And oh my gosh, this is kind of an embarrassing story to tell, but you and I spent probably hours over the course of a month trying to guess
why this person would not communicate with us.
right, because we were making an assumption they were getting the emails and purposely ignoring them.
Yeah. Which, who knows?
No, it ended up
kidding.
not being the case. I choose to believe and trust that for some reason they weren't actually receiving them. And once we finally got communication established, everything worked out fine. Mm-hmm. But I'm just telling you, we waste a ton of time and energy trying to predict other people's motives. Mm-hmm. Stop. That's what happens when you withdraw. Yeah. You have to fill in the gap with all kinds of suspicions, all kinds of conjured up ideas of what's going on. 99% of the time, you're not accurate with those, and you just wasted a lot of time and energy.
It reminds me, you put up a quote this week on Instagram, and it's a different context, but it reminds me a lot of this, where it's the current moment is not unbearable. It's what you think
yes
potentially could happen, or it's all the spinning off of the what ifs. That's unbearable because it's out of your hands. It's in the future. It creates anxiety. But the current moment is not that. And so it's like that. It's before you spin off all the craziness, just exist in what you know is. And then you'll come to know the reality, but it's absolutely toxic to sit there and spin in it.
Yep. Which is what you have to do almost when you withdraw. You have to make assumptions.
Yeah.
That's why the engagement is so important, and in whatever format, it totally depends, right? Based on what relationship the gap's been created with. But to sit down with that other person and just say, hey, I got to be honest with you. I got a gap here, and I need your help with this because this relationship is important to me. It's either important to me, because A, I love that person, or B, our ability to work together produces something that's important. Mm-hmm. So, hey, this relationship's important to me. Yeah. There's been a gap here, and I just want to talk about that.
I think it's a big one for work. Specifically, I had a job that I feel like a gap was created by my boss, and this is not a current job that I have, but a gap was created, and I took that gap, a couple gaps, honestly, were created, and I withdrew. And I did my job, but I just no longer trusted this person. And so everything that this person did, I was like, oh, that's a lie. That's a lie. Or you're not being honest or whatever. And I just spiral in in the toxic mentality. And I was not happy in that job for a long time because of that. Where if I had maybe gone to my boss and said, hey, I feel like, something's off. Like you said this, did you really mean that? I feel like I could have probably gotten on a better track with that person. But instead, I just labeled the whole company as dishonest and like, peace. Yeah. And so I think that I've been only thinking about it in the sense of like relationship, but there's also a lot of this, like you said, with career and job and stuff.
Yeah. What's the name of the show that we've been watching lately?
From Scratch?
From Scratch, which I thought was it's a series of...
It's like
it's based
8 episodes.
On a true book?
I don't know if it's a book. It's just a true story, but maybe a book. Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe a book.
It was great, but there's this scene in the show. The last 4 episodes, I think I cried through all 4 of them.
We did, yeah.
A lot of tears. Oh. But there's this one scene where this couple are getting married, and her mom stands up to give a speech, and her dad had been divorced, I think, for a long time. And the mom gives this illustration about sometimes in marriage, you're going to get a pebble in your shoe. Mm-hmm. And she basically said...
On the journey, you're going to get a pebble.
On the journey, yeah. Deal with it. Because if you don't, you walk with a limp, essentially is what she was saying, right? Yeah. And that kind of reminds me of this. Like, on our journey with people, whether it's in the workplace or marriage, you're going to get a pebble in your shoe, right? Yeah. A gap's going to get created. And that gap, if you engage it and deal with it in a healthy way, can be filled in with trust and become a very beautiful thing. Or it can become this gaping hole that one day it's almost impossible for you to get by because you never addressed it.
Yeah, that's good.
All right. 4th one. And this one is specific to those of you who possibly have created a gap with somebody else, which is all of us. Mm-hmm. All of us.
Yep.
Right? And that is be trustworthy. Be trustworthy. Now, being a trustworthy person is not someone who never creates a gap. You hear that? I think it's really, really important. Being a trustworthy person does not mean that you're someone who never creates a gap. Being a trustworthy person means that you own a gap when you create a gap. It's a big difference, right?
Yeah.
Own a gap when you create a gap. And now it takes humility, and it also takes awareness, right? So the example that we started with of me being 45 minutes late with you, that means I need to not come in and act as if nothing happened. Like,
Right.
just hope that Jordyn didn't notice that it's 5:45 instead of 5, right? Maybe this will just blow over. No, I need to own it. The very first thing I need to say is, regardless of why I'm late, even if it was to stop to help the old woman change her tire, it needs to start with, I'm sorry. I told you I'd be home at 5. I wasn't here. Right? And then if there's further explanation needed. But when you create a gap, you need to own the gap. And I would say, and this is really important for those of you that are leaders, maybe you have a small business, maybe you have a large business you run. I know that for all of us that are leaders, creating a healthy culture is really, really important, right? And you got to create a culture where people can admit mistakes with confidence instead of hiding mistakes out of fear,
It's good.
right? So this goes both ways. And so whether your leadership is your family unit or whether it's your company, creating a culture where people can admit mistakes with confidence instead of hiding mistakes out of fear, I think is really important.
Yeah.
And if you create a culture like that, and someone around you is still consistently trying to hide their mistakes, you no longer have a culture issue. That person has a character issue. And now we're dealing with something completely different.
Right.
But there's a lot of people who are inside of a work culture where if a mistake is made, it is blown up. They're penalized instantly. They're not going to get the promote. So yeah, of course, in that culture, they're going to try to cover up their mistakes the best they can.
Yeah. Well, I think about it relationally, being that safe space for your spouse, your friend, your whoever. Because if you take advantage of the moments that they're vulnerable and say, I'm sorry, or even if you like go on the attack before they even have a chance to explain themselves, I'm going to run and hide.
Yeah.
I'm not going to feel like I can admit when I'm wrong because I'm so busy defending myself or trying to not be like, verbally harassed. It's something that I feel like you have to be the safe person if you want to have this trustworthy relationship.
That's
you
right.
have to have safety on both sides. So that vulnerability can happen and you don't feel like you're going to be punished, because if you create that, then the gap's just going to be created all the time because no one wants to deal with that.
Yeah. Yep. You're dead on. So just for review, beware of your bias because you have one. Engage instead of withdraw, which I think is the most important point. Assume there's information you don't have. When you go to engage with that person, don't walk in with your guns loaded, right? Assume give them that opportunity.
Yeah.
And then the fourth is be trustworthy. When you create a gap, fill the gap.
Yeah. And I think that last one, we're all imperfect with that. And I think that's a skill to learn,
For sure.
having to be intentional enough to like stop yourself, fill in the gap first or apologize first. Like that's something that, because we all kind of want to like stand up and just put our defenses up.
Yeah.
So I think that one is almost something you have to really practice for it to be something that you can, implement quickly, in a moment where you do create that gap. So that's really good.
And I have found over time, especially with people that I lead, when they own a gap before I even see it, it speaks volumes.
Huge.
Volumes. I remember years ago, I had a student pastor on our staff, and my oldest son had just went into the youth group. They had a night where some things went very wrong. It just didn't work out the way it was supposed to work out. And he reached out to me almost immediately, right? Now, I probably would have heard about it, probably not from my son, who probably didn't even recognize the things that went wrong, but a parent, somebody would have sent me an email. I would have found out about it. But he owned it before I could.
Oh,
And he came straight to me and said, hey, this happened. I'm sorry it happened. Here's why it happened. And I'm going to do my best to make sure it never happens again. Man, that instantly won a ton of respect with me. And I had even more trust for this guy.
More trust. Yep.
More trust. Even though there were mistakes made, that could have eroded trust if I had found out about it a different way, or if he'd have made excuses or whatever. He just owned it.
Yep.
And man, when you own your gaps that you create with the people around you, you win them over. They feel like there's some natural trust built in, and you're not going to hide stuff in the future.
Exactly. I think that's true in relationships too. Like I was just thinking, if you ever came to me and told me something that I probably would not have found out anyways, I would be like, I trust this man with anything. Like, like he's going to guard my heart and I'm going to guard his. And I think that's a really interesting point, even organizationally. So
yeah. I saw on the news this morning, Mark Zuckerberg, which I know is a polarizing figure for many, but I think they laid off like 13% of their staff there at Meta. And they showed a clip of the video he had sent to his employees. And the very first thing he said is, "This is my fault."
Wow. Yeah.
Didn't blame, other
There's
people.
probably 100 other people.
Didn't blame the economy. Didn't blame. He's like, "This is my fault." Essentially saying, I created a gap here. I thought that we could afford all of you. It turns out we can't and still be profitable.
Right.
And I don't know. there is something that
really
wins me
powerful.
over. Yeah, very powerful when somebody creates a gap but then owns it.
Yeah, that's good. I like that one. That was very practical. Like you
I
said.
told you.
You told me.
Do you doubt me?
Yes, you've broken my trust. I'm just
I
kidding.
created a gap.
You created a gap. No, I think that's really good. When trust is broken. That's awesome.
And you know what I like about it the most? When you talk about breaking trust, even the title of this, when we called this "When Trust is Broken," it sounded so heavy, right?
Yeah.
There's something about that feels really heavy. That's why I like the gap language. Because instead of going
not like
someone and
lie
saying,
or-
"You broke your trust," you can just say, "Hey, a gap was created here."
Yep.
So it gives you language, and I've heard this from organizations I've given this talk to. They're like, "Thank you. We just needed some language
That
to
didn't
start
feel
conversations."
so heavy.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. Because even "you broke my trust," if that's the first sentence out of your mouth,
know.
it's like, I'm already mad.
Like, crap.
Yeah, exactly.
Jeez.
That's good. I like it. Well, if you'd like to share this or subscribe, all the things, that would be super helpful to us. And as you hear us talk about in the podcast, this is also on YouTube. If you listen on Apple or Spotify or wherever else, it's also on YouTube. We had someone comment the other day that said, this is my first time actually watching you guys. I hadn't done that yet. So not that it's any more interesting, but if you do like that format, that's available to you.
If you enjoy garlic.
Yeah, if you enjoy half-done garlic, then this is your place. This is your place. Thank you very much. And that was another
Good talk.